all fish need, places to eat, places to reproduce, places to rest. So when we think about just a typical stream, you think of deep, slow water as in pool habitat, which we have out here.
So here I'm standing in a pool. You can see the water's much deeper, about 2 feet deep here in this location.
It doesn't always have to be a giant pool. It can be any sort of slow, deep habitat behind boulders, in bends, places like that, which is good resting habitat. Faster water in riffles and in runs is important for feeding usually. Anywhere really in those habitats that has slower water, so behind, again, boulders and rocks, large wood, other things like that is going to be important habitat.
The Mass Endangered Species Act is a state regulation that requires all products within rare animal habitat or plant habitat to be reviewed by the division. Part of my role here at the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife is to review products and activities within rare species habitat.
Different fish species have various habitat requirements, and that within a given species, different life stages of a fish have also different requirements at given points in their life. A way to benefit the fish from that perspective would be having a much more complex sort of habitat with a wide variety of different features that appear at different times of the year, whether it be something physical, chemical, temperature-wise. What is complex habitat would be, rather than having maybe one type of a good habitat feature, whether it be a pool, having one giant pool is not going to help out a given fish species or even a different life stage of a different species throughout their life. They'd much rather have the complexity of riffles, runs, pools, woody debris, cover to fulfill the different requirements they have at different points in their life.
This is a really classic river-road conflict area that the state has been doing a lot of work on through the Rivers and Roads training to improve our resiliency and design approaches. So here, the wall was repaired and the toe of the wall or the bottom of the wall was armored, but we installed native river material over the top and created a flood bench. And so the river can flood over that material, but also the base of the wall is protected. The balance of protecting transportation infrastructure and making it resilient so it lasts a long time, as well as protecting fisheries resources and rivers around the Commonwealth is really the goal of the Rivers and Roads program.
This section of Westfield Brook along Route 9 is in habitat for 2 state-listed fish, particularly the long-nosed sucker and the lake chub, both very dependent on high-quality streams often associated with cold water fisheries. With this initial design, Mass DOT was challenged with having to replace a retaining wall. Their original design focused on just simply putting some angular rock in front of the new wall. As a division, we must review any project or activity to understand what the impacts may be to the species and their habitats. The initial design was problematic from a few different levels. It had the potential to impact downstream habitat and erode the habitat that's currently available on site in this reach of river. So we worked with their design team to come up with a mutually beneficial alternative that allowed for the bank to be stabilized and the wall to be replaced while still creating habitat such as boulder deflectors, woody debris, and a floodplain bench for both the long-nosed sucker and the lake chub.
Large wood is an essential part of fish habitat, and so there's some wood installations out in the river, and then the fish seek cover and food around those installations.
Here the wood forms part of the food chain. As well, the wood can stabilize the bed and the banks of the river. And large wood that is bigger than the bankable width of the channel, and also in a forested setting, the wood is not likely to transport and flood very far. And so the wood is not a threat to downstream infrastructure such as bridges or culverts.
Here's some refuge, a location where fish could find some shelter. As the flow comes down here, most of the velocity is going to stay outside the bank here. So in this cubby hole here, fish could get in here and find some shelter. This is especially attractive because of the overhanging vegetation. You can see a few feet of overhanging vegetation here. And the water is still quite deep, providing a nice shelter location to get out of the main flow.
This is going to create a lot of hiding areas for fish, as well as some refugia for them from, again, predation and for temperature areas where the water's not going to heat up nearly as much. Flow will actually be a little bit slower in some of these areas because it's blocked up by wood and other substrates that are up above it. Some of the species that we have are black-nosed dace and long-nosed dace. They're riverine species that we have in a lot of our rivers and streams across the state. Long-nosed dace tend to be a little bit more finicky compared to black-nosed dace, where black-nosed are pretty adapted to living in many water types, as well as a little bit more of a warmer water system. So if you start seeing systems where it's mostly just black-nosed dace, it could be an indicator that something's going on with water quality. One of the other species that we found were white sucker, is one of our 3 sucker species that we have across the state. They are ubiquitous, meaning that we found them all across the state in all watersheds. Usually we'll find juveniles and some adults in rivers and streams where they mostly live. Adults can also live in lakes and ponds, but they do require access to rivers and streams to be able to do spawning and feeding. Some of the other species we found were slimy sculpin, which is one of our cold water indicator species. So we do only find those in the nicest and the coolest of the streams we have in the state. They do require very specific temperature regimes. So they do need to have very good, cool, high quality water with good oxygenation, as well as available habitat.
The presence or absence of different species in different age classes is a very good indicator of the quality of a given system. You can talk briefly about fisheries sampling, specifically electrofishing, which is simply just the use of electricity to capture fish. The minimum amount of energy put into the water to stun fish that we can capture them without harming them. When done properly, this doesn't harm the fish, it doesn't harm people. It has the potential to be dangerous, but when care is taken and done safely, it's a very effective method for non-lethally sampling fish in a variety of different ways. This is just a tool to accomplish an end goal, which is to see what is in a given system. That can be for a variety of different reasons, but one very kind of generic thing you can tell from what you find in a given river would be kind of an indication of what is going on in that river or stream or lake. We do a variety of different processing metrics, but the 2 standards are usually fish length and fish weight. So these can be compared over time to see how populations shift and change. Our standard approach might be where you would sample for several sampling years prior to any kind of alterations, whether it be dam removal, habitat restoration project, and then sample for a longer time frame after. And we can kind of compare how things change and ebb and flow, see how the fish system responds over time.
So we're at the Weeki Brook where the former Bartlett Pond Dam was located. The dam was removed back around 2014 and was owned by the town of Lancaster.
Part of the project was to reestablish connectivity with the brook to the Nashua River, and then reclaim the area so natural habitats will start to pop up based on the flow reclaiming the floodplain.
The dam was rated as a deteriorated structure in poor condition, and it was causing exacerbated flooding downstream at the main roadway driving through the town here. In addition, it was blocking fish and wildlife passage and the natural movement of sediments and natural materials. The town was able to remove this structure to address both the ecological needs of the stream reach as well as provide flood resiliency benefits, included reduced costs to the town.
So the types of habitats that we look for are nice runs and pool sections. There's going to be a lot of undercutting of banks as the stream starts to cut down through the sediment that was remaining from the pond itself. Another thing with this area being reclaimed by the stream is we're going to start to have more of a riparian area, a buffer zone along the stream banks. So you're going to start having a lot of cattails, goldenrod, that kind of stuff, and eventually some shrubbery and some small trees will start to take root along the banks. This will help the habitat in 2 ways. One, it's going to create bank stability, so you're going to have less erosion, less sediment and whatnot going into the stream and mucking it up, as well as it's going to start to create shade and cover for those fish. So cover from predation as well as keeping the temperatures relatively cool so more of those cold water species can remain in the area.
Our role was really to thread the needle of protecting infrastructure but also protecting the river. It's really the goal of the Rivers and Roads program.